All right, great. Well, listen, everybody, I have a very special interview today on this podcast. If you're listening to it, the Light On, Light Through podcast. If you're watching it, this is my YouTube video channel. And as I'm sure most of you know, in my spare time, I'm a professor of communication and media studies at Fordham University. Actually, I shouldn't say spare time. Probably I spend most of my time being a professor. And I've been doing this for a long time. And I don't ever recall in any place that I've ever taught. I've been teaching at Fordham since 1998, and before that, the New School for Social Research, all kinds of other interesting places. I don't ever recall anyone who was a freshman doing what our two guests are doing today. And by the way, I just noticed that the name that appears under our video. It just says the name of Kingsley Marin, who is one of the two people I'm interviewing. Uh, I don't know if you can put two names in, but the person who isn't Kingsley Marin is Massimo Seriale. And they are both the creators and ongoing producers, along with other people, of course, who write of a relatively new publication, The Polar, which I think couldn't have come along at a better time. So, why don't we begin by either of you or both of you telling us what motivated you to do this? What is the Polar all about? How is it different from other publications? And how do you think it's especially crucial in this our incredibly dangerous for democracy day and age?
I'll go ahead and start. The story is going to sound cliche and fake, but I can promise you every ounce of it is very true. So, Massimo and I had two independent prior to me. We only met each other here at Fordham. I'm from Los Angeles.
I'm from
He's
New
from
Jersey.
New Jersey.
Opposite sides of the world.
Right. And we had these visions for a news or media platform independently, and the two came in to synthesize to create what is now the Polar. So,
Yeah.
Massimo, why don't you start by telling them what your motivation?
So essentially, I really love the news. I enjoy political discourse heavily. However, I always found it so annoying to have to look at multiple news sources to find, like, conform some sort of opinion that was unbiased. And not only that, every time I wanted to find a primary source to make my own opinion, it took like hours. So I always had this vision of a news source that was just straight up bullet point facts. And then
I had this idea that was growing about promoting polarized discourse. So it would have stories, people, a platform, a singular platform where people on the left and people on the right, or liberals, conservatives, whatever you want to identify as, would have a way to where you would be able to say what you think and your perspective on an issue, and simultaneously be exposed to what the other side has to think. Because a major issue is algorithms, and the algorithms really promote polarization. So TikTok, Instagram, all these places, they have a systematic mathematical way of only feeding you content that you agree with. And my vision was to sort of combat that.
And then this is the part that sounds fake, but we were both talking about this walking back from class when we had barely known each other.
Yeah.
I think like 2 weeks into the first semester.
semester.
And we looked at each other and in unison, very comedically and dramatically said, let's just do it. So we kind of did just that. And less than a week later, we created and sent out our first issue to, I think, like 50 people.
I mean, if we had that sort of epiphany moment and we were just like, this needs to get done. And you wouldn't believe how difficult it was to navigate.
Oh,
we had no exposure to, like,
no idea what we're doing.
What we had no idea how to navigate the MailChimp and different platforms that would be able to get our story in a frame, and like
had to learn
how to write
stuff,
and even getting people to write these original stories. Like,
oh my
because
God.
within the first week, we've made many adjustments since our first issue, but we've stuck to this framework of like 6 or 7 bullet points of like what's been going on that week, and then the 2 stories. So we had to get writers at first
Yeah.
too, which was
And
very
we had to convince people that it was worth their time to write a 300-word article on an event of the week
Yeah.
for, you know, a company that didn't even exist yet. So that was really difficult. Well, we should just tell them what the polar is, like what the
okay,
issue is.
right, yeah.
So it's essentially, you open it up, it's about a 5-minute read. It's super easy to digest. It is the 6 most important events of that week of what has happened.
And then on the story that we deem to be the story of the week, or what we now refer to as the hot topic served cold, to stick
Yeah.
to our polar theme, we have writers contribute polarizing perspectives on this issue. So, for example, this week we had the whole Atlantic leak with the
Jeffrey Goldberg
being added to the group chat.
Yeah.
And we would send this to our readers, and we say who's got like a polar take on this, and then they submit articles, and then we put one on each side into the issue.
Yeah, and the thing is, it comes out every Monday, so every Saturday we send out what the hot topic is to every single one of our readers. So literally anybody, you don't need any special qualifications, can submit their own analysis and, you know, get their voice out there and have people, you know, talk about that.
Yeah.
So obviously, you couldn't have come along at a better time
Oh,
in
definitely.
terms of the need for what you're doing, and also in terms of material. One of the things I always say in my classes is, you know, one of the few, if maybe the only thing I like about Donald Trump is he gives me such a big range of material to talk about in just about any class that I'm teaching.
Yeah, he's the golden spout.
Now, so just to be clear, can anyone contribute to the polar, or
Absolutely.
you do seek people to write pro and con articles about given issues? But if someone just wakes up in the morning and heard about the polar and has something that they want to say about whatever new outrageous or maybe not outrageous issue that's come along, how does that happen? They email you and suggest, well, I have an idea. Can we do this?
So the way that you could wake up one morning, walk down to a coffee shop, see the polar coffee sleeves that we have, scan the QR code, sign up to be on our thing, and by that night you could have written an article that would be in the Monday issue.
Yeah.
Now, you want to go into how our selection process works?
Our selection process right now is unfortunately limited just because we're on MailChimp. We would love to get as many people to write as possible, but it would just be a ridiculously long issue. So we choose the most polarizing takes. We have the people, I mean, if we have people that that have written for us a lot of times before that we know are good writers and know what they're talking about, we might prioritize them. But we get a lot of submissions each week, so we try to spin it around. So right now we have a kind of randomization thing, and we just try to get the most radical opinions possible.
Right. And just to clarify, hearing that for all you new listeners out there, you might think, well, why this is the last thing that we need is America having more polarization. But it's important for them to know that Massimo and I we don't have a congruent set of political values. I mean, like, we're best friends, whatever, but I am definitely more conservative leaning. He has more left leaning ideologies. And we're essentially trying to prove that you can find common ground and you can be exposed to these like radical, polar opposite perspectives, etc. And it not just be filled with hatred and filled with all this stuff.
And it's because, you know, modern media has made it impossible to have civil discourse without it turning into a personal argument on Twitter comment sections.
Right.
And why am I getting berated by a 40-year-old man in Indiana right now about tariffs, you know? So we're just trying to prove that even though, like, me and this guy don't have a lot of common ground at all, and I spend probably about 100% of my time with him.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've figured out a way to do it, and we want to prove that that isn't gone from America.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but let's talk about polarization. You actually, the two of you now seem to be saying that you don't think polarization is a good thing because this is what we find on social media. As you were saying, the algorithms in all social media basically create and augment polarization because what they do is they create these news bubbles, as we know, and then all you wind up getting are things that support your point of view because the social media want you to keep coming back and so on. So when you say, the Polar, which is the name of your publication, how does that communicate what you were just saying, which is actually not polarization, right?
Well, the thing is, we're trying to take a new spin on the term polar. So we don't want it to be uh, polar with a negative connotation. With the algorithms, and say you're only subscribed to the New York Times or you're only subscribed to the New York Post, right? Like you're going, that is polarization because you're not exposed to what the other side has to think at all, because they provide the biased analysis to what's going on in the news. But with the polar, what we're doing is providing these different biased polarized analyses, but also in like ensuring that you're reading the other one as well. So it's not polarizing and promoting separation, it's polarizing and ensuring that you're being exposed to what the other side has to think. So at least, like, even if you're going to be an off the deep end right side radical, at least you're going to know what the other side has to think, something that no other news source offers.
Exactly. And especially targeting our generation. I mean, the second that somebody disagrees with someone that is Gen Z, the conversation just ends because people are so unwilling to be open minded. And we're just really trying to get that back because I think that is what has made this country so divided.
Yeah.
Well, I agree. I mean, one could argue that a little polarization is not necessarily the worst thing because it sharpens the opinions on both sides. But I think most reasonable people would agree that the situation in our country right now, and probably in most places around the world, is almost polarization gone crazy to the point where it is almost armed camps, and in some cases, literally armed camps with differences of opinions. Let's turn to another slightly different topic. We had an excellent meeting in my office, I guess about a month ago. And one of the points that sort of surprised me, but I was actually then glad to hear it, and we talked a little bit about it, is although both of you are students at Fordham University, I'm a professor at Fordham University, you decided early on that you didn't want the polar to be a student activity. So can you elaborate on why you made that decision?
Yeah. So we are very committed to the fact that whatever you say, unless it's like something crazy like a slur, we're going to put on our page because we think that it's so important that a voice is heard without being filtered. And we were worried that if we went through Fordham University or through Fordham administration, we would lose the ability to have a filterless media company. And we were just so worried about that part of our brand being diluted. So although it could be an advantage for us, we were just very committed to that idea.
Also, this wasn't just speculation. I started the year as a writer at the Fordham Ram. I was writing political pieces on numerous things that were happening around college campuses, the world, etc. And the inherent bias that was correlated with the university was very prevalent. They wouldn't allow me to put in certain things that weren't opinions, things that were facts. And I was just like, this was part of my reason for starting the poll. I was like, this shouldn't be allowed. Like, I should be allowed to say exactly what I think, especially when it's fact based, and not have to worry about a university and whatever higher values that they're holding being infused into what I'm trying to publish.
Well, I don't mind publicly endorsing that point of view because I think it's a good point of view. I mean, I think universities are very important. I think it's no coincidence that the both of you are students at Fordham University because I do think Fordham University encourages diversities of opinions and viewpoints. But I also think the two of you are completely right that anything that is an official student activity at any university will inevitably wind up reflecting something of the university point of view. And you want the poller to be completely open to all points of view. Let me ask you another question. In your opinion, and I've read, a lot of, material, a lot of the issues. What do you think the most provocative, outrageous issue is that the two of you have addressed either by writing or by inviting someone to write in the Polar?
I think
It's got to be
Palestine.
Palestine. I mean, it's really got to be the stuff in the Middle East. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, for thousands of years, there's been a holy war going on there.
Yeah.
But especially with, Israel and Palestine becoming puppets for
Proxy wars.
it's just getting more and more intense and more infatuating to pay attention to.
Yeah.
And we've had a lot of writing.
That's where we're getting the most traction with our solutions.
Yeah,
Always.
that's
I mean,
what
it's
people are
also
most
because it's what's on everyone's mind all the time,
And
especially
it's
when you're a
crazy.
student in New York
It's-
City. Because like you go, I mean, obviously Columbia has been the epicenter of this since the start.
Yeah.
And it's just like this is the conflict that even if you aren't someone that avidly reads the news, you're very exposed to
Yeah.
every day. I mean, I'm on the subway, people are wearing keffiyehs, like it's just become
just
a
around.
part of the New York culture. And this is it's definitely, like, everybody seems to have a take on this.
Yeah, adding on to what King was just saying right there, it is so interesting how much of an impact a war thousands of miles away has on everyday life, especially for us as owners of a news company, but for actually anybody. I mean, the Constitution is being challenged based on something that is happening in the Middle East. That's pretty insane and pretty exciting to follow, unfortunately.
Well, I think that's a wise choice. I agree with you that it certainly, all these issues are provocative, but there is something uniquely provocative and disturbing about what's going on in the Middle East. And I think what you just said makes all of that, even if it wasn't relevant to our daily lives, now it's certainly relevant. It's right in our faces when someone who is a graduate student at Columbia University, there's a knock on his door uh, over the weekend. He's married. His wife is 12 months, 12 months, 8 months pregnant, and who is knocking at the door? Some people who are basically arresting this guy who has a green card. Legally, the green card entitles him to all the protections of an American citizen. And of course, one of the problems with our laws, there are all these little minor laws, and to some extent, they contradict things in the Constitution. So, if I'm not mistaken, he was arrested on the basis of the Secretary of State being given shortly after the Patriot Act was passed, shortly after uh, September 11th, 2001, they were actually trying to reform the Patriot Act, and they were trying to limit what the government could do in its fight against terrorism. And that's what the revision did do, but it left open the power that the Secretary of State has if he or she thinks that someone is a danger to just do that with someone.
Well, what would
And
your
go
question
ahead.
be? No, I'm asking you, what would your answer to that question be? What do you think is the most provocative topic in politics right now?
Well, it's a really tough question. Well, I guess I'll tell you what it is, and maybe it's more selfish than talking about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Selfish in the sense that it directly relates to the United States. And in fact, I've been talking to my students about this, that it's no secret that Donald Trump's favorite president is Andrew Jackson, who is known for many things. He was actually a general before he became president. He's a hero way back in the War of 1812. After the war was over, by the way, that's an interesting story too. The peace treaty had already been signed in London. This is 1814, ending the War of 1812 between the US and England. But they didn't even have a telegraph back then. So news of the treaty had to be put on board a sailing ship, which took a good 3 weeks if the winds were favorable to cross the Atlantic. Before that news reached the United States, a massive British army attacked the United States in New Orleans. And Andrew Jackson, as a general, amassed a lot of American fighters. And he was a brilliant military strategist, and he basically delivered a massive defeat to the British. Again, even though the war was over, sort of interesting oddity in history, and it shows the importance of communication. But because of that, Andrew Jackson was a very popular person in the United States. And as president, he did a lot of awful things. He massacred Native Americans. But the reason why I'm talking about him in answer to your question, there was some case, I don't recall exactly what it was, that the Supreme Court in the 1830s decided against Andrew Jackson's policy and a law that had been passed and signed into law by Andrew Jackson as president. And when word of this got to Andrew Jackson, this adverse Supreme Court decision, Jackson's response was, well, the Supreme Court has made its decision. Now let's see it enforce it. And if you think about that, that's pretty chilling because the Supreme Court does not command a military force. They don't command a police force. They have, obviously some guards, court people, police who keep the Supreme Court itself safe. But that's not enough to basically enforce a decision if a president doesn't want to enforce it. So when you ask what I'm most concerned about at this moment, it's everyone is, I think, correctly focused on, okay, all these things that the Trump administration is doing, they're being reviewed by the courts. So far, Trump and his administration hasn't been doing very well at all. Some of the massive cutoffs, at least 2 or 3, even 4 of them at this point, by Elon Musk and the Doge team, although I prefer calling it the doggy team. But on the other hand, I don't mean to insult dogs. I actually like dogs and I don't like Doge. So they've been rebuffed at the federal district court level. Now it's going to the appellate division. They'll make whatever decision and it's going to be appealed. And assuming the decision is against Trump and Elon Musk's government agency, whatever exactly it is, it will go then, this issue will go to the Supreme Court. Most Americans think that the Supreme Court is the ultimate arbiter of what is legal and what is not legal in the United States, what a president can do, what a president can't do. Andrew Jackson didn't think that. And Trump has made it clear that he doesn't think that. And, just added on to that, you probably, heard of this. I think the news broke just yesterday. Trump and his people are already talking about Trump being president for a third term. And I don't know what they're going to come up with. So
See,
that's
just
its own issue, but it relates again to the, what is going on clearly with Trump is that the Constitution and what is provided in the Constitution doesn't particularly matter.
Yeah, it seems malleable.
yeah.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, we actually did just do a full analysis on the third term thing you were just speaking of on our TikTok page. And after doing a lot of research, there is a more than surprising amount of ways in which he could pull that off. So it's definitely not ruled out, especially because of how adamant he's been about it.
Yeah.
So I can see how that's very interesting topic.
Yeah,
It is.
it's also so interesting how the then again, on the polar takes, people really are in massive support of like his
Yeah,
third term
that's
idea.
the
and
most
it's
interesting
never
thing that we have found is that from speaking with all these people and getting all of these such, diverse opinions, there are a lot of people who are extremely willing to ratify the Constitution at any given point in time, depending on whatever Trump wants to do. People
Yeah.
really think that there's a lot of people that really affirm that he is the saving grace of America.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, this is why Winston Churchill, who is often cited as the source of a quote, and it turns out he isn't. So I'm not 100% positive that he said this. This could be just another thing that's attributed to him, usually attributed to him, is pretty famous for having said, democracy is the least worst system of government. And what he meant by that
Yeah.
is obvious. I mean, it's not as bad as a fascist dictatorship, but it's no great shakes either. It's very easily destroyed. And I think we were probably talking about this in my office. It's something that anytime I talk about these things, it just always occurs to me, and it's especially disturbing in view of the situation we have here, that Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party were twice elected to commanding positions. Actually, they didn't receive a majority in either election, but they did well enough that they could combine with other parties. The Weimar Republic had a parliamentary system, but that was a democratic system with a small d. He got into power twice, and then he said, "You know what? It's a real waste of time to have to go through these elections. I'm just going to declare myself the Führer."
Totally. And even this morning in my global business readings class, we were talking about uh, this discussion about accountability. More specifically, it started on the scale of just within a corporation, like if the CEO makes a problem, like who really takes the blame? Is it the company that should take the blame, or is it the employees? Should it be a subordinate? And I think a massive problem with democracy, and why I totally agree with Churchill, is that you could elect an official, like, majority of Americans elect Donald Trump, and then he becomes the president, and they elect him with an intention for a set of values and a set of things that he will accomplish. And then it turns out that he has the free will to do whatever he wants. He could wage a war against anyone, whatever. And suddenly the Americans they're going to face the repercussions of the actions of an individual that they elected into power deceptively. So that's the biggest issue with democracy, is you never really know what you're going to get out of it. And I'm sure that the people who, Hitler and all these fascist dictators have been elected into their high positions of power were elected under the gaze. I don't know.
Gaze. Well, it
Gaze.
could be a gaze through gauze, so you don't
Oh,
see clearly.
right.
Oh, wow.
Exactly. There we go.
There you go. Never forget
That
again.
they're just going to be, further employment, better for the economy, this, and that. And then suddenly, like, they have to deal with the brunt of so many geopolitical and massive issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, it's a very serious issue. Right along with Churchill, there was a British author by the name of E.M. Forster, and he wrote a book called Two Cheers for Democracy back in the 1940s. And it's the same kind of thing. He's saying it has a lot of problems. Socrates, the great philosopher, he hated democracy. And his argument was, if your horse was lame, it was having a problem, with one of its feet, what would you do? Would you ask the people of Athens to take a vote on what to do with it? Or would you just take it to a vet and have the vet take care of it?
And he
So,
also was like, there's just too many bozos out there that shouldn't have a say in like there are certain people whose intelligence and their skill sets should be allocated to what they should do, and they shouldn't have a say in grander issues that don't really apply to them. They don't really know what they're talking about.
Yeah, and on that point, at the end of the day, anybody can talk. Anybody can say whatever they want, and it's not illegal to lie. In some cases, it is, and in some cases, people are just too tired to check it out. That actually does go into the polar because it's been just to, solicit a little more. Just joking, but it's just so difficult to find out what's true anymore when you have people telling you this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And it's baffling about how it shouldn't be a normalized thing to fact check debates. That shouldn't have to happen at all.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be so normalized to the point where 10 lies is a low number
Yeah.
for
And-
either side.
Yeah. And building on that, so facts are something that no, you don't really know. Like
Yeah.
for the example of the war in Gaza, the death toll is something it's very hard to be able to calculate, especially when you have Al Jazeera reports, you have Hamas official reports, you have this, you go to different sources, you're going to receive new things. So a vision that we have to be able to combat that. We have an app in development by a team of coders at Northeastern, and we're coming up with different ways in which we could promote discourse in a way that's like more intellectual than Twitter, because it would have a fact checking thing, a feature that I actually came up with the name for called the ice pick, where the way that we would be able to combat this sort of not really knowing what the facts are is if there was, say, a number, like say it said 50, someone is doing a Polar post about the war in Gaza, and they said 50,000 people dead. That would be underlined in a dotted way. Be able to click on that to where it would show 3 separate reports of that number: a left side number, a right side number, and somewhere in the middle. So this way, you're not just receiving one number of what the fact actually is. You're receiving all sides, and then from there, you're able to choose the one in the middle or on each side that but at least you're going to be informed.
And our slogan is news that doesn't tell you what to think. And that's just another way that we're providing that. We are just going to give you everything that has been said. And then you can create your own analysis of that based on what we are giving you, because we don't want to be claimed to be unbiased or centrist, which is just almost impossible to do.
Yeah, which is why we've received some professors and stuff have given us criticism like, oh, this is not unbiased, this would pass no unbiased check. We're like, you know what, maybe that's right, but the way that we ensure that we're not telling you what to think is by, we have different beliefs, and then we take our, since it is, I don't even know if we've accented this, it has humorous interpretations of the facts that can be humorously interpreted. So we take little jabs at each side. So we'll take little jabs at Trump, we'll take little jabs at each thing to sort of ensure that it's not like, okay, there's a very clear and prevalent political agenda that is being pushed here, and that all sides of sort of a centrist ideal is being pushed.
Yeah, and then that also, sorry to keep talking, I'll make this quick.
No, keep talking.
That also goes into the idea of keeping an open mind. Keeping it light is really important for that. Being able to satirically interpret what's going on is very important when you're having discourse, so that you don't end up yelling at each other.
Yeah.
Well, I agree with all that. Let me say, I really love the cold metaphor because I think it does apply. News served cold is inherently rational. It's more open to discussion for a variety of reasons. I mean, first of all, literally, if something is too hot, you can't eat it, right? You don't want to.
Totally. Wow.
Wait,
So,
Paul, you might see that in the next issue.
That could be
pretty good.
That might be in an ad that you'll see on the subway now.
Yeah, hey, go for it. You should put an ad on the subway, you approach them and say, them, I don't know who them is, I guess, whoever, the New York City department, that you want to contribute something that's going to lead, to better public discourse. I don't know if they have, in effect, almost like a PSA ad.
Yeah,
and the
that's
truth
true.
is, you guys aren't making money from this.
Right,
So
since we're not for profit, we'd be able to really lean into that. The only thing is we just, getting the capital to be able to,
we are college students at the end of the day.
and we are freshmen.
And it's all coming out of the left pocket right now.
Yeah.
So, not the most,
But yeah, I mean, if we spin it in a way that's like, this is a public service announcement, we're not for profit promoting civil discourse, then I think it's a lot more feasible.
yeah, definitely.
well, I think seriously, the world in general, even though we're in such dangerous straits, there are still many rational people in this world.
Yeah.
And, after all said and done, as I also always tell my students, I pretty much agree with John Milton and Louis Brandeis that, it's better to keep the marketplace of ideas totally open, because when you start excluding things, you may wind up accidentally excluding or deliberately excluding the truth, and people then won't be able to use their rationality to decide what's right or wrong.
Yeah.
Tell our audience honestly where you see the polar 5 years from now. So the two of you will have graduated Fordham. What would you hope to see?
I mean, I think we actually might have differentiating opinions on this because
Okay.
I really see it as it can be anything. Because right now we're so focused on our news thing, but I could see it being a source of social media that everybody is on all the time just to talk about anything. I could see it as us like selling different products, different, I mean, we just have very broad visions. And I don't even want to say what it could be because that could possibly limit its potential.
But yeah, we definitely are in agreeable about what this would. The goal is for it to become just a social engagement platform, but
Oh, yeah.
promoting it in more of like an intellectual way, right? So the problem with X is that A, it doesn't allow enough characters to be able to get like a formulated political opinion out there. It promotes only polarization because it is an algorithm-based
Yeah.
platform. But I would want this to become like we often talk about when we're on the subway and stuff, and we see people on their phone. An issue that I'm always seeing is someone sits there, it's like their brain is turned off. They're
Yeah,
going
they don't even know what they're
TikTok
looking at.
to Twitter to Instagram back to Instagram back to TikTok.
letting
Like
the time
it's just
pass.
it's just a vicious cycle of
Yeah.
like consume, consume, consume. And that's just sort of being wasted. I feel like
Yeah.
with a polar platform, people would be able to be utilizing that time in a way that was, stimulating to their dopamine, which is always important to be able to actually have users that want to engage with it. But then in a way, they're also like, they're going to get off the train and they're going to have learned something new.
Yeah, definitely. And we're also, not to mention with the algorithm thing, we really do plan on committing to the fact that we are going to be the first big social media company that does not have an algorithm. We have
Yeah.
no plans on maximizing your dopamine. We have no plans on making money off of you.
Yeah.
We're just going to give you the raw information
Cold
that
hard
comes out of the
facts.
cold hard facts, if you will. And that's all you're going to get out of us.
Yeah.
And we just want it to be we want it to be a community.
So yeah, as of now, our driving product is our newsletter.
Yeah.
Because that's just sort of like it's how we're expanding, it's how people are getting their ideas
And it's
out
fun.
there, and it's fun. I mean,
We love
we have
it.
a blast
We
writing
love
it
it.
all the time, and it's just the best. But yeah, the goal is for it to ultimately become an app and then something much bigger. And honestly, the app is just like very limited too. We want it to be something where I have an idea for a podcast where people would
Yeah.
be coming on each side, and then there's an issue, and then they have sort of like I did debate in high school and stuff, and it could be sort of like a PF format where you have like 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 3 minutes, and this way, because the thing with podcasts and debates and stuff now is it's just yell, 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 yell. Like
Yeah,
you're
who can be louder right now?
louder. That's the opinion that gets across. Especially, I don't know if you've seen the like Ben Shapiro will go
Oh.
to a college campus or somewhere in public, and then there'll be like 30 people sitting in a circle around him, and then they come and they sit at a table and they have a discussion. But then since it's so not structured, it'll end up most of the time with one person just like yelling, 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 not listening to anything the other person has to say. And that's just the way it goes. And then we have more ideas for maybe like each having our own funny little new like perspective channels
Yeah.
showing where we do like a 10-minute video of us like talking about an event with like a cool little backdrop.
Yeah, just fun little stuff. I mean, also, we're in a constant state of coming up with more ideas. I mean,
Yeah.
it's all we think about genuinely.
Yeah.
I mean, we're always just like we had this idea, we might go up, like do like man on the street interviews, go up to people in New York City, do
Yeah.
stuff like that. We're working on making picnic blankets right now just to give out for free to
Yeah.
people. We had like a weird marketing idea where we're gonna make a pile of snowballs in the middle of the summer on a beach and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, always like just stupid stuff like that. So we don't really see any limits to
Yeah.
what it could be.
Yeah, I saw that picture, the both of you out in the snow with those white.
Yeah.
Very cool.
A big part of our marketing is just the winter.
The
so.
winter.
By the way, I just want to note for our viewers and our listeners, we'll just have to take my word for it. I see a guitar in the back there, and I just want to mention to you Marshall McLuhan, who's someone who I work with and studied with, and I think is one of the most brilliant, actually, not one of the most, probably, definitely the most brilliant and significant media theorist in history. He used to always emphasize that logic, okay, is very important, but as he put it, you need to be more than just another logic boy. And you had to have an appreciation for the arts, which meant an appreciation for music, for painting, for that kind of
That's one
thing.
thing we
So,
definitely got going.
The thing is, we're such, this sounds so like to our own horns here, but we're Renaissance boys, you could say. Like
Yeah.
we're into every single thing. We're both
Yeah.
musicians. We both play piano, guitar. We're listening
Yeah.
to music
All
every
the
time
time.
that we're hanging
Yeah.
out. This room, I'm a massive TV and media
Yeah, super
connoisseur. I have my books over there. Like we just love
Yeah.
consuming art. We have a massive appreciation
I
for just
mean,
everything.
at the end of the day, he frames it as Renaissance boys. I frame it as I can't be bored, so I'm always just finding something new to do.
Yeah.
And it ended up that we both found doing that in stuff like art.
Yeah.
Like we both taught ourselves how to play the instruments we play. We do it all. I mean, my days consist of I wake up, I go to class in the background while I think about the Polar all day. I play guitar for about 2 hours. I work on the company, and then I have espresso, and then I go to sleep.
Right, in that order.
they'll probably fire me as a professor, but I think that's a good policy,
Yeah.
nice, creative policy. By the way, apropos of music, you guys should write a song, a jingle.
Little jingle.
Oh,
I was
there
thinking
you go.
about that.
That
Yeah.
could happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've been thinking about ways that we can incorporate like our musical personalities into some sort of like
Yeah,
ads or TikToks
without
or
it being the
something.
corniest thing alive.
Listen, do it. What you think is corny, someone else might think is great.
Great point.
That's a really good
I,
point.
so you're going to keep publishing over the summer? You're not going to
Oh,
take a
yeah.
summer
We have
break,
no
so it's
plans
a
on stopping
continuing
anytime soon.
thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So listen, for everyone again who's watching this or listening to this, there are going to be show notes. There will be a link for you to check out the Polar, for you to subscribe to the Polar, no charge whatsoever. And just one more time about anyone who wants to contribute, they don't need any credentials. If they do have credentials, that's okay. It could just be anyone,
Absolutely.
anywhere who has something to say that
Yeah,
you
your
find
Polar
valuable.
News at yourpolarnews.com is our thing if you
Is
want
our
to just check it
website.
out for all you
Yeah, and then
listening
you can
out
sign up there. You can look at our past issues there to see what one of our like writers would look like, what kind of thing they write, how we write.
there. Yeah.
And you can see our mission statement on there as well.
They're called our Arctic Archives.
Oh yeah, you can just check those out.
I like
I mean,
it.
yeah, but yeah, our only thing really, our literal only requirement is that if you say some sort of fact, you need to have a source. That's it.
That's it.
That's literally it.
Okay.
Or you could even say a fact and then mention how that could possibly not be accurate. Good enough for us.
Yeah.
All right, that's very fair and very reasonable. And let me just conclude this by just expressing a hope that if you guys ever become like incredibly famous and like you have some kind of show or podcast that millions of people are listening to it, make sure you invite me on the show.
Oh,
you're gonna be our
you're
first
the first
guest.
one on the list. Don't
All
worry.
right. Well, listen, it's really been a pleasure talking to you guys. I truly think you're doing something very important, and I expect great things of you in the future and the not too distant future. So, thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Have a good
much,
day.
Paul. Have a great one.